Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the fifth generation leadership podcast. Grant, you want to go ahead and announce yourself?
Yeah, Grant Smith, co-host. Today on we have Patrick Riley, who came to our notice on Twitter. He shared his religious accommodation request for the COVID vaccine. And so just as an off-the-cuff thing, I shot a text to Rodney. I was like, oh man, this is the kind of guy that we, want to talk to, because, Rodney and I originally linked up based on my religious accommodation, which I put online on Substack. And to my surprise, he texted me back. He's like, "Yep, he's down." So, yeah, looking forward to talking to Patrick. Patrick, mind introducing yourself?
So thank you, Grant and Rodney, for having me. So I'm Patrick Riley. I was in the Army 16 and a half years, retired as a combat medic with a medical exemption, but I had submitted my religious accommodation, which of course got denied, and I did appeal. And at that point I started my medical process. But other than that, I'm also the CEO of a few companies, and I launched those as I was getting out. Took about a year to get out, but yeah, so there I am.
Yeah, real quick. Do you want to plug maybe your Twitter or your any website, and then people can follow along with this exemption too while we talk about it?
Yeah, sure. So my Twitter is @RealReaperCEO. And my website for my business, the primary, is reaper.financial.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, when Grant reached out to me, he just texted me and he's like, I think you said something like 16 years, 68 whiskey, forced out because of the jab or something like that. I of course got on and creeped your Twitter a little bit, and it didn't take me much reading of your very long and very in-depth religious exemption to say, all right, I need to reach out to this guy. And because ultimately you're doing what we're trying to do, just in a different way, shape, or form. But I think at the end of the day, right, we all have this message that we're trying to announce to the world of like, bro, there is some evil nonsense going on, and like everybody that we thought were leaders are not, pretty much. Does that sound good to you guys?
Yeah, I'd back that up. So I think what we're really trying to accomplish here, and a lot of people ask, what now? Okay, so what do I want out of this, or what am I trying to convince people of? I'm just trying to get people to know what's going on and know the truth, because we have a serious problem. And
Right.
I think that it's a serious problem, not in that I'm absolutely 100% correct. I don't know if I am. I'm probably wrong
Right.
about one or two things,
Yeah.
if not more, right? But the evidence, or the proof in the pudding, is that our concerns were completely unmet, unentertained, and buried. And I think that speaks volumes in and of itself, that active duty military personnel saw a insidious plot against the United States with a threat to national security, and that was swept under the rug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that stuck out to me with what you said is, like, I might be wrong on one or two things, but for me, since the start of this, and I've had this experience in other contexts, but I think all three of us have, we believe heterodox things, and we always have. I think COVID's just the latest example of something where we don't believe the orthodox narrative, right? And just because we don't believe the orthodox narrative, I don't think that means that we're necessarily right. I don't think any of us are saying that. It's just that we don't believe the orthodox narrative. We have serious concerns, and if we don't voice those concerns, then what if we are right? Then we're responsible for not saying what we think. And I mean, there are regulations, like within the Army and leadership, like our regs on leadership and doctrine, that point us in the direction of speaking our minds, choosing the hard right, all that kind of stuff. But it seems like when you have heterodox beliefs that don't go along with the mainstream narrative, the kind of go along to get along thing, that following those recommendations and engaging in the what we classically understand as leadership and communicating candidly, all that went right out the window.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was real naive when I joined. I joined at 17. So I was one of those people. I'd watched Saving Private Ryan and Full Metal Jacket and Mulan. And that was about my total vision of what the military was. I thought I'd live in an open bay and I'd get in a line for a big bucket of rice and soup, and I didn't realize I got paid to be in the Army. That was literally how little I knew when I joined. And the things that mattered to me, the things that I actually joined for, was the Constitution, the oath of enlistment, the values, the Army values, the Soldier's Creed, the NCO Creed. Those were things I took to heart. And those were things I lived as though they were laws to live by. And I feel as though the United States military has completely thrown aside its oath, the oath of enlistment, the oath of office. It's completely thrown aside the Constitution. It's no longer serving the American people. It's serving a government, and that government has been corrupted.
So on the Constitution, you said that was important to you coming in. When did you form those beliefs? Was that in high school? Like, at what time did you kind of look at the United States Constitution and think, hey, something special, there's something special about this country. There's something special about America. It has to do with that document and the promises within, in terms of anyway, yeah, just when, if you can remember back that far.
I mean, so really, and I don't know if it's generational, but when I was, growing up, early 90s, it was basically ingrained in us. We still said the pledge. We still believed in America. We, my family history was very, chaotic and broken and that type of thing. And yep. And then a broken home, even with a father who was not a good man at all. He was very envious and embracing of the military, and looked up to it, and looked at the military as such a admirable profession. He'd been drafted during Vietnam and got the boot during Vietnam for medical reasons. So I just saw this as basically a pillar, that it was up there as something I could achieve, something I could attain to make myself somebody respectable in the world. And the Constitution and history, I don't know, maybe I'm just one of those weird kids that I actually read the textbook in history class, but when you read the textbook, you came to really admire the George Washingtons, the Benjamin Franklins, the Thomas Jeffersons. So whether that was, all bullshit and indoctrination, yeah, at least to some degree, but I really believed in this country, and I haven't given up that belief just because the media has taken things another direction and told us that America's now a horrible place with nothing but sins and basically, should shame itself.
Let me add on that real quick. So me and Grant actually, on the first episode, I talked about my background and my upbringing, and kind of the roughness associated with it, and how, that helped me progress as a leader, because I had grown up sooner than what I should have, and I matured sooner than what I should have, and I was independent a lot sooner than I should have been. Would you say that helped you thrive in the military? Because I specifically pointed out enlisted, especially the people that joined around the same time I joined, and I specifically talked around the dates of 2007 to 2009, 2006 to 2009, around that time period. it seems like all of the enlisted that I have noticed that have excelled, right alongside me, or, somewhat similar, they always had a similar background to me, and it was the more uh maybe sheltered kids or ones with a nice upbringing. Those were the ones that you didn't really see thriving that much. Do you think it has any play in it at all? Because essentially our podcast is about leadership, so I just got to get your opinion on that.
Yes, absolutely. So from a leadership perspective, and I didn't mention this, but I have a background in psychology as well, forensic psychology, and from a psychological perspective, the children who grow up, the young men who grow up basically in broken homes and with more challenges, more stress in their life, they're generally going to go towards proving themselves as a person, proving themselves as a man, and they want to be recognized with authority as they come into adulthood. So there's really only so many routes, right? You're going to go into drugs and gangs and abusing people and having power over others, or you're going to be a protector and you're going to go into military or law enforcement, or something where you feel that you can serve others.
Right. Or maybe a mixture of both before you joined the right side,
Some people have quite a colorful past and history, and I think the knowledge and experience is it's a net benefit, whereas the people who are, as you said, sheltered, or grew up with a very good life, they don't handle the stress very well, and they don't know what to expect from a world that is not as clean and friendly as
right
they've experienced.
When you experience those real wake-up calls that you don't know how to deal with, but somebody else might have dealt with it at 6 years old, 7 years old. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast. So we've established that you were pretty hua. You were full Army before you even joined, whereas I was the complete opposite. I didn't know anything about the Army. I didn't even know ranks or different jobs, or whatever, different circumstances for joining. So you joined. So obviously you know that you wanted to go this route, or that you wanted to join the military. Why not commission? Why did you go enlisted?
So I was actually homeless at 12 years old till 17, and I did want to go into the Marines. I was going to be a grunt, and do grunt things, but they wouldn't take me in the Marines till I was 18, and I was an emancipated minor. So I was looking at, I had another year on the streets. Basically, I lived in whatever car I happened to acquire, and I worked, as a waiter, or car washes and that type of thing. So I chose to go ahead and do the Army, and they only took me reserve initially, and then I went active. But because I joined at 17, I didn't have, of course, time for college, and high school was
oh yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. That was a dumb question, honestly. Now that I think about it, looking back. But why no green to gold or anything since then? Why no or warrant officer or anything like that?
Yeah, so I went for my degrees once I got in, because I basically cut high school after 10th grade. I went and got my GED at 16 because I was emancipated, and it wasn't really serving my time. So I felt that I needed to continue my education, because I didn't want to be that person that was.
Good on you, man.
Yeah, I just, I didn't want to be that person. So
yeah,
I went to college, kind of bounced around in what I wanted to do a little bit. I did initially law enforcement, and that didn't really take. And then I was going to go for the PA program, and in the Army, being a medic. And I learned that I don't really like chemistry,
yeah, right, yeah,
and biology all that much, and kind of came back around to psychology. So I finished my bachelor's in psychology, but by that time, finishing the bachelor's, they wouldn't do green to gold. So there was a social worker program. I didn't really want to be a social worker. I was aiming more for a specific career field. So I went and did my master's in forensic psychology. I finished that and I was like, well, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm an E6. I've been in greater than 10 years. They won't take me in OCS. So I'm just going to go do an MBA now. So,
Right.
Yeah, because
Okay.
that's one of the things that I was curious about. It's like, this guy's got 2 master's degrees,
Very established,
a
man.
staff sergeant at 16 years. How did the Army not retain this guy? With that level of education, with that level of individual drive. But I mean, I think we all know the answer to that question.
I know the answer to that question. They don't want educated enlisted. I tell you that much right off the bat. They do not want educated, intelligent, free thinking, enlisted people, especially ones that can draw conclusions or connect dots from certain events, no, they're the ones that are on the ground seeing everything. You can't have them connect dots and be intelligent enough to form a basis for their own opinion. You got to have them dumb, and if the Army really cared, they would push higher education a lot more than they do. They say that they push higher education, but no leader really wants their soldier, taking time off from the field to go to college and doing this and doing that. No, man.
Well, the bar for maxing points for promotion is pretty low, right? Like,
well, probably not for you.
Education. No, I mean for on the enlisted side.
I thought you meant like promotion points. I got
yeah. And I would agree. I don't think they want independent thinkers at all in any career. Really, because you're meant to follow orders in the military,
right? Yeah.
To think. But I do have an opinion on that, as far as, since this is a 5th generation leadership. I want to say so. The way the military pushes the education right now, they want you to have a bachelor's to make E7, a master's to make E8, E9, right? The realistic way that plays out is that if you get the bachelor's, you have no incentive to stay enlisted. If you get the master's, you definitely should not be enlisted. For myself, attaining a master's in forensic psychology, staying enlisted another 10 years and not using that degree for its design and for its purpose would basically mean that I'd get out, retire, and have a 10-year-old degree that I've never worked in that field, and civilian employers are going to go, no. So the way the military is asking for that education is not thought through, and really what I think needs to happen, if we pull America out of this hole we're in, what needs to happen through the military is they need to get rid of the enlisted officer divide, because there's too many enlisted right now coming in with bachelors, with masters, and there's no incentive to be enlisted.
Yeah, I think we're thinking outside the box, right? I think that a part of this desire to have folks get a bachelor's and a master's, doesn't matter what it is, just get one. With the education system, I very much feel that the institutions are all captured by managerial liberalism as an ideology. And the whole CR, that's, people are like perplexed why critical race theories become so dominant in institutions. I don't think it's necessarily because critical race theory is so appealing. It's because it's aligned with managerial liberalism, where the whole idea behind that ideology is we have to have this power, and there's smart people that are experts that go to school that then need this power in order to plan society, right? And control what we do. And I think that forcing this higher level education onto senior enlisted, I think whether they realize it or not, it's like, hey, we're trying to acculturate you into this managerial class where, you might be a ground pounder, like very practical minded. It's like, well, we can't have any of that. We have to refine you. You have to come and do this bachelor's degree in BS, and you have to do the BS and not say anything in order to get your degree. Like a lot of these degrees, you can't engage, like you will not do as well if you engage critically and you write critical papers that say your professor is not going to agree with, especially on the liberal arts side, if you're doing criminal justice or political science or something like that. So I think that whether it's intentional or not, I think this desire, like you said, is they want E7s to have a bachelor's, E8s to have a master's degree. I think it's so that they can be sure that these people have all been acculturated to this managerial class. Whereas like people with the attitude that's like, I'm not doing that. Like I got like real stuff to do. Hey, what'd you guys used to say? I work for a living. Like, don't call me sir. I work for a living, right? You guys had stuff like real skills, and I think they're moving away from that. But yeah, I just wanted to interject that because I haven't really made that connection until you mentioned specifically, because I've heard that before. I just never really put it together.
That's why you have enlisted advisors, sir.
Yeah.
I just met.
Okay, so all right, Patrick, I know you got another interview coming up here soon. Probably gonna want some time in between it. Let's get
I got about an hour and a half, so we're good.
let's get into the nitty-gritty of stuff, man. Well, first of all, before we do that, just to see kind of where you align as far as like how you viewed the military, was there ever a point where everything was great? Was there a point where it all shifted and went to hell? When would you approximate this time frame to be? And ultimately what changed?
I joined in 06 in the Bush years, and I can't say a whole lot changed from Bush to Obama years as far as what I was doing. I made it up through E5 and things went pretty good. I was kind of a slow mover in the career, mostly because I was motivated by morals and ethics and not by getting myself promoted. And the I had a saying a while ago, I forget what it was, something about rank is for those who are compliant, and basically the ones who toe the line, they made it up, and the ones who actually worked and did things, those were the ones who were sitting still. But yeah, I would say through most of it, my experience was fine until I started really embracing and understanding what was going on a larger strategic level.
When would you think that was? Like, could you put a year on it, or
probably 2017?
2017? Okay. I was telling Grant about how I had really noticed a shift, at least as far as the quality of leaders around 2013. And then like just the overall motivations of the army, I guess, how everything turned very political, very civilianized almost. You have all of the SHARP, the EO, the 350-1, that type of stuff. But then, yeah, I mean, obviously, 2018, even 2017 and beyond brought a whole new game, ones that blew our minds, but as far as, so you say 2017, you kind of like woke up. Is that kind of what you're saying a little bit?
Yeah, basically.
So did you have any frustrations before you woke up?
I was definitely frustrated before that. So all the things you mentioned, the SHARP, the EO, all of this, so they're all very clearly social engineering programs that are being forced on the military. And basically it's for those who don't know, for anyone watching that doesn't know, these acronyms and terms, don't go join the army to find out. So SHARP is a sexual assault program that basically goes around telling every male that they're a rapist and damning them for being a horrible human being for being male.
And at a minimum, everybody's a sexual harasser.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. If you're not an assaulter, then at a minimum, you're harassing people on a daily basis.
Yeah. And EO is basically everybody's a racist, and but specifically if you're white, you're a racist, and
or straight, you're a gay basher or something.
Yeah. So
I think honestly, back in the day when those programs first started, but this is like Cornell's iron law bureaucracy, like EO's been around forever, and the problem is when these programs that promote something good, which is equal opportunity, is good. Like everybody should be equal under the law, right? That's in line with the Constitution. People shouldn't sexually harass people. Sexual
Yeah,
assault's
it's
already a
all a
crime.
given. It's all a
But
given.
yeah, exactly. But in the hands of an activist, right? Then all of a sudden, like the EO program, like the Equal Opportunity Program, instead of being about promoting diversity, because how do you promote diversity if you're treating everybody equally? Like it's just random chance. The only way to actually make your
The
organization more,
discriminate.
yeah, it's discrimination. So, it's like the inverse of what the program says it's about, and it confuses leaders because they don't have any idea, and they don't assume there's any bad actors that have an ideological agenda where they see that and they're like, yeah, we're going to actively discriminate. Or inclusion. What's inclusion? Well, inclusion to us is like, yeah, it's just like you have a unit function, you make sure that everybody's invited, you don't just invite one person. But inclusion to an activist is we have to discriminate, or we have to suppress speech, right? Because some speech is going to offend some people. Like, so if you're too candid with your speech and that hurts somebody's feelings, well, you're not including that person.
Mhm.
And so it's like this subtle stuff, it didn't necessarily start like that, but once the program's in place, it creates a vehicle for activists to then make it into, and to me, it's like I hear 2017, it's like these programs exist for a long time. I was actually a unit victim advocate. So I went to over 100 hours of sharp training, and they really tried to make it, straightforward. Like, hey, it's bad for morale, and like their sexual harassment definitely exists within the ranks, and sexual assault's a crime, and we don't want that stuff. But then activists take over and then turn it into the things that you guys were saying, and nobody's able to call that out and dial it back because they don't know the difference. They don't have the training and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to give that caveat because people can see that and they can think that we're saying that, we don't think that sexual harassment happens, and we don't think that sexual assault happens, or that we don't think that there's any sort of discrimination. Although I will say the Army is the most diverse organization in the world, right? So like if any organization doesn't have a problem with discrimination, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm sure, yes, it exists everywhere. But of all the organizations in the world, I think the Army is probably the best in the world. And so saying it's like the number one threat. Anyway, I just wanted to give that caveat.
Oh,
so
I absolutely
characterize
agree.
it as,
The Army has really the best inclusion and diversity of any organization I've ever been a part of. I can't deny that at all. As far as the sexual assault, I think it's absolutely a problem. I think it's horribly handled. And you probably, as a UVA, have plenty more insight than I do on that. But I think the maturity of the organization to be able to admit when something is beyond its scope of handling, that's the problem. So the Army, because it likes to take everything that's in the military and go, this is only going to stay in the military. We're going to investigate these ourselves. We're going to try these ourselves. We're going to handle these ourselves. That's where I see the problem with, for example, SHARP is because those should be investigated by civilians on the outside who can be objective.
yeah, it's a conflict interest.
Exactly.
Like it reflects badly upon the command if the findings are substantiated.
Yeah.
So that's a huge moral hazard.
And even worse is the ones that are actually found guilty are not punished appropriately. I had my driver all through Iraq who went away for the FBI, found him on 12 counts of child molestation where he was posting videos online and all this, and they caught up with him like 4 years after I'd known the guy and arrested him. He got the 12 counts, he was found guilty. They only gave him 10 years.
Wow.
Knowing the guy, I would prefer it was longer. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and just so nobody does get it twisted. I was a battalion victim advocate, or not even a victim advocate, a battalion SARC. I guess it started as a victim advocate since 2013. So for the last 9 years, I've been 8 years, I've been a battalion SARC or a battalion victim advocate, working at the brigade level, doing division functions, doing on the job experience, and continuing education hours, and having to recertify my certification, my licensing, it's called DSAC, but it's like a national accreditation agency that you have to actually submit stuff to. So I don't want people to get the impression that I feel a certain way about it. It's that it became to the point where it overcame, like it overpowered everything else in the military. Like training stopped, like stuff that you should be focusing on as a soldier or as a leader. Not saying that you shouldn't be focusing on sexual assault, sexual harassment.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
the
just
way
saying
you know how they sell it though. They sell it as it's blue on blue, and it's going to degrade mission readiness.
But it's just like,
but if you're not mission ready,
Exactly.
then it creates this disconnect, and that's
right.
And with mission focus, I mean, so our requirements to qualify with our weapon was twice a year, right?
Right.
40 rounds twice a year, or
but you do sharp 4 times annually.
Exactly. You do 2 PT tests, 2 APFTs or ACFTs per year.
Yeah.
That's it. So to me, the amount of time spent hammering those things versus the things that actually make a soldier and put you on the front line and make you, combat effective, they did not focus on the mission at all.
Okay, so you're noticing these things. You're frustrated. E4, E5. You're noticing kind of from the sounds of it, you're noticing a bureaucracy as far as like a popularity contest. People that either are best friends with the people that is their leader, or people that kiss ass and brown nose and will throw aside all their morals, essentially. You're seeing these guys progress faster or sooner than you, or be put into positions of higher responsibility, maybe, or something like that, and not necessarily deserved. But that's the extent of like your frustrations, is maybe some nonsense, maybe some popularity contests, but no, like my eyes are open and I see the leadership for what it really is, the army for what it really is, the government for what it really is, etc.
Yeah, that didn't really start until later, but
Okay. And reading your religious exemption memo, man, it's pretty wild. First and foremost, it's not for anybody that goes to look it up. It's not going to appear as a religious exemption memo, because ultimately it's not. But you don't have to apply for a religious exemption memo strictly based off from religion, right? It can be off from your strong moral convictions as well. So if you feel, if you have a very, very strong belief about a certain thing, I mean, obviously they try to evaluate and give your belief credit, but no other man or woman should be able to tell you what your beliefs are.
Well, the way that I couch it whenever I talk about it is non-traditional religious belief. So it's religious belief, right?
Oh,
it's
yeah, for sure.
Because it's like you're saying, it's about matters of deeply held conscience.
Your principles, your deeply held faith,
exactly,
your principles,
but
your morals.
The Religious Freedom and Restoration Act outlines that, and then and this isn't even definitive, but it's like we're talking, these are First Amendment rights. Okay, we have a right to expression, and that's where that's the basis of the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act. But if you want like a handbook to kind of give you an idea, the Equal Opportunity Commission has a handbook on religious discrimination, and that outlines, hey, this is what we consider a religious belief, and this is what the courts have said. And so if you use that standard, then what Patrick wrote out, like what he was describing, constitutes what I would say is a non-traditional religious belief.
Yeah, I'm not discrediting
it with one way. Which is compatible with what's in that EEOC handbook, but it wouldn't even have to be. But nevertheless, I digress. I want to hear about, you said you started in 2017 is when you kind of started noticing what was up. Like, I want to hear about that. What did you start noticing? Like, what was the research that you were doing in
So
2017?
so really it was 2017 when I was at Tripler Army Medical Center. I just transferred there from Alaska, from Fort Wainwright. And I saw the cultural shift of going into a hospital environment where basically the entire chain of command was very much in a bubble, in a political stance that was very clear that they could not look at things objectively. They weren't seeing things for what they were. They were only seeing things for what they wanted to tell people, and wanted to project to others. So that was really, it started off as politics. It started off as just an observation of how they couldn't accept the state of what our country was. Of course, Trump had won the election, and there was people who were just blindly falling into this trap of the media, brainwashing people into hatred based on things that weren't reality. And that was really, I guess that's what woke me up more than anything, was watching the false narratives come out that were very clearly psychological operations. They were very clearly coordinated. They were, you could tell that the media had it out, and it was a fix, and it was not something that was organic. There wasn't a conversation. There was a movement.
Is that something that you noticed that people at Tripler, like that were medical, like tended to talk about and have discussions about at work?
Well, they tended to lean towards the liberal side, and of course in Tripler there's civilians as well as military. So I would have civilians there that were very much just open and out about their liberal side, being support of Black Lives Matter, support of Antifa, the fuck Trump mentality and things like that, and he's a racist, and all these just unbased beliefs, which is ironic, given where I'm coming from at this point. But they were just so unhinged in what they were saying.
Yeah, what really stands out to me about that is just the double standard, right? Because if somebody had been saying that about the previous president or the president after, people would give pushback. They'd be like,
We
"Oh, you
see it
can't.
right now.
That's a commander in chief. You can't say
Yeah.
that, right?"
There was
And
absolutely no way anyone would have spoke about Obama that way.
yeah,
Never would have happened.
yeah, and I agree with that being part of the culture. Like, it's not really professional to be disparaging the commander in chief while you're at work. But what I don't know about you, but what was so offensive to my sensibilities was the double standard. It's like, look, I didn't talk about or think about politics. Like, I majored in political science, but I did a really good job of not talking about it really or thinking about it for a long period of time. And then all of a sudden, it seemed like it was okay to do that, and then all of a sudden, not okay. And it's like, look, you guys started this. You guys started taking these very political positions and then trying to characterize them as apolitical. And I mean, frankly, I think a lot of the positions that people have taken, like extremism being the number one threat to the force, I think that is a very political position. And they're characterizing it as like, no, that's just how it is. And it's,
Well, and I thought that was great when when Biden pushed the extremism mandate ban.
Oh my God, man.
And they were pushing it down as the KKK, and I'm like, I've been in the army for 16 and a half years, in what, 7-8 units. I've been around thousands of people. I've never once ever met anybody who supported the KKK or even indicated it or said anything about it. I'm like, so where is this coming from?
Yeah, me neither. The only thing that I've seen is I had a soldier one time tell me that he was a white supremacist before he came in, but that basic training fixed that really quick.
Yeah.
You know, that was the closest thing that I'd seen to that.
Yeah, the treatment did not fit the symptoms. Let's say it that way.
So
Yeah.
let's get into the religious accommodation and talking about, you know, Q posts and just your perspective, because you're into finance. Like, I think the finance, everything that's going on with finance is a really good lens to understand what's going on, but I think you probably understand it better than I do. I know that Rodney is more into the finance piece than I am, and I'd really love to hear about that. Kind of like, what do you see? Like, just tell us the narrative. Like, what's going on now from your perspective?
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna use a little bit of my notes here just to read these numbers off, but this is just to put in perspective what's going on right now and really where we are. So $290 trillion in global debt, $94,000 of US debt per citizen. So if you had a child yesterday, that baby was born $94,000 in debt by the national debt. $78 trillion global pension deficit, which is as of 2018. Social Security empty by 2037, although they've been pulling it since 1983. They've been pulling it out the back door illegally ever since. And that's 15.3% of your income. Student loans at 1.75 trillion, negative bond yields, 14 trillion as of 2019. I think it's up to 22 trillion today. So we're talking about a situation where the U.S., after basically we came off the gold standard in 71 and the dollar's unbacked by anything, COVID hits and the M2, the money supply, goes up by almost 150%. So 60% of all dollars in circulation right now were minted within the last 2 years, right? Or 2 to 3 years now. So basically the inflation that's going to come with that is going to be insane. So effectively what we could do for an American citizen back in the 1930s, not even during the Great Depression, during the 1940s, you could save 25% of your income and retire in your upper 50s in your house or your farm or with a couple cars, and you'd be okay. One income didn't have to be a great income. It could be, a grocery store attendant, whatever. That was normal in the 30s, 40s, 50s. We started seeing credit come out, and with credit and debt and loans, we really started to see this snowball where basically people, they were borrowing money that didn't exist, and with that, France and other nations started trying to recall the gold for their dollars that were supposed to be gold backed. And that's when, of course, Nixon shut down because they didn't have the gold. They were stealing it. And then we really went into this snowball of debt to where we are now, where people are working 2 or 3 jobs for both members of a household or in a family. They can afford less children. So we have a population bust coming. And, they probably never get to retire because there's nothing in their pension fund. And really, Americans can only take so much more debt. You can only borrow, 200, 300, 400% of what you're going to earn for the entirety of your life. What happened with housing prices last year, shooting up by as much as 100% in some markets. The dollar is done. That's the situation. Is the US dollar fiat global reserve currency is done. We are over the fiscal cliff. Nobody's looked down yet. It's Wile E. Coyote over the cliff, and they just look down and it's going to fall. But right now, the dollar's dead, and that's going to cause great power struggle. That's going to cause Russia and China and the BRICS nations against the United States. That's going to cause what we're seeing in Ukraine, and that's a natural progression of history, because really the fiat unbacked monetary system was an experiment, and it's only been going since 71. In the grand scheme of finance, that's nothing. People will look back on this this time period as if we were crazy to ever put any value on an unbacked dollar.
So you say it's unbacked. Do you not kind of subscribe to it being somewhat backed? Because you said, world reserve currency, right?
Let me,
Why is the world reserve currency? petrodollar.
So it's backed by debt.
Yeah.
So the other nations take debt, take loans from the US, which, is supposed to be them paying back in goods and resource. And they stopped buying our treasury bonds. They stopped, paying their debts. So basically we're in a very vulnerable situation monetarily as the United States, where we could lose financial superiority over the world very quickly. And that's where cryptocurrency comes in, because it's the natural evolution of money. We went from barter systems up to precious metals and gems, and then it became coins of marked value. We moved into paper money, and we moved into checks, and we moved into debit cards, and now your money is already digital. It's all just in a bank and numbers, and the required
ones and zeros.
Yeah, the mandatory minimum reserve for banks is actually 0% now.
Oh.
Yep. So they don't have to have anything. They're just putting
every bank can just engage in.
So real quick, if any of the viewers want to have any idea what he's talking about, if they don't, look up the Bretton Woods Agreement. It was either 71 or 74, 71. I think.
So the first Bretton Woods was post World War II. It was 1950, and then there was an amendment.
Talking about the ending of it.
Yeah, so 71 was when we took it off the gold reserve. Yep.
Yeah, and then also going even farther back before that, the 1930s Gold Act. Like those two things are a very good place to start to realize what's going on. And then I guess if you have any sort of knowledge of like the petrodollar, that might help. But ultimately, and when he say what I'm assuming is he's saying when the dollar is done, he's saying like it is inevitable that it is going to just get wiped out, right? There's only two things that can happen. Either the government comes to our rescue with a new solution that they had already had planned in place before the pandemic. The pandemic was the trigger for a lot of things, right? So if you want to change the monetary system, you can't just do it. You have to get buy-in from the public. Well, in order to get buy-in from the public, you have to create a need for the public to want to buy into it, right? So if they plan on this great reset, this great monetary restructure, this great, by the year 2030, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy about it. Well, in order for us to believe in any of that, they need to create a situation that's so horrible for us that we would be like, oh, please save us, and then so it's either that or everything just goes completely to chaos and animosity until some new person, until some new revolutionary system comes and takes the place.
I mean, that's cryptocurrency, right? Bitcoin is a trustless system, and as long as it's not centrally controlled, that's kind of I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think that going forward, I kind of see there's a bifurcated path where we either end up under total tyranny under a central bank digital currency,
mm-hmm.
or decentralized finance of some variety that we can't possibly know exactly how that would look, but some combination of cryptocurrencies and or precious metals playing a role. Potentially once the petrodollar system, like these BRICS nations, if they get together, if Saudi Arabia stops requiring that people buy oil in dollars, then all of a sudden, the dollar's no longer the world reserve currency,
mm-hmm.
and everything can kind of fall apart overnight.
Well, I personally don't think any of this is going to happen until they are finished stealing as much money from us as possible. That's what we've seen all through I mean, the fact that Robinhood was hyped up at the time that it was hyped up, and the YouTube sensationalism of traders and stock market channels, and just the great financial psyop that was freaking 2020, 2021, just for them to turn around and take it all, right? And then run another hype, and then turn around, take it all, run another hype. And every time they hype, they know that they can get people with the trader psychology of, okay, it's going to finally freaking break above this time. You know what I mean? And every time they just reset the trap. And they've even done it so well, they've got it down to a point now where now SPY options, I don't want to get too far off topic, but for the S&P 500, it used to just be Monday, Wednesday, Friday for selling options contracts on shares. And now it's every single fucking day of the week. But yet these brokerages can turn around and steal your options 30 minutes before the market closes. And then as soon as they do, the freaking shit shoots back up. So now the thing that they stole from you for nothing, or that they paid like $1 for, is now worth like 2 or 3. And it's just how they're just putting in work on us, man. Like 2021 or 2022 as a whole was just these evil people putting in work on everybody. And at least they used to do it to a point where where we would be like skeptical, you know, and we'd cry insider trading or whatever, or we'd suspect it. And then every once in a while they'd snatch somebody up or whatever. But it's like now they're doing it blatantly out in the open. It's almost like everything that they're doing, they either don't care that we see, or they're getting sloppy because they're rushing for something. And otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing it. You know what I mean? That's my take on it. I think that they want us confused as shit, for starters. That's why we have this, oh, good news, bad news, good news, bad news, you know?
And I think it's the culmination is the collapse of the dollar. That's what we're really facing right now, right? So China helped that along. They've done everything they can to help that along, and you know, what would we expect? Of course, right? They're trying to collapse the dollar because they would never have won in a head-to-head military confrontation.
So
Okay.
I think we're all on the same page with that threat, you know, debt, something's coming to a head, and just the fact that people are ignoring that and pretending like everything's hunky-dory is crazy. I think a lot of people recognize that, even in the military. One of the things that I really wanted to ask you about is your experience with seeing the child trafficking and what role that plays in the financial system. Because I, you know, recently saw Whitney Webb. You know, I bought her books. I'm not through them, but I got started on her first book. Trying to look at the history of, you know, Jeffrey Epstein and that entire circle, but just how it's kind of like a big apparatus and blackmail. And I've seen you tweet some about that. I saw you address some of that in your religious accommodation. So I just I really wanted to get your thoughts on that and what role that plays in what's going on today.
Yeah, so it's a 35 to 50 billion dollar industry just in the US, and the you know, trafficking, it's not just children, it's not just sex. There's children, there's sex, there's labor, there's organs, there's drugs or mules, there's so many different elements to it. And really it's become such a pervasive industry that it's part of every government on earth. So and when I say that, I mean for one of the things I put into my disclosure from my religious accommodation was basically just a class I built for combat trafficking and personnel, right?
Yeah, I saw that with the on the front, like did you actually provide that training to folks?
I provided that training.
That is crazy. Did that meet the annual requirement? Because we have
It
that
did.
required. Okay. And you just volunteered. You were like, hey, look, I got you guys. I'm gonna put this training together.
Yeah, I was the NCRIC for the department, so they needed the training. I was like, you know what, all right, I'll teach a class.
That's crazy.
So, and when you just look at purely convictions and things that went in front of a court regarding senators, Congress, mayors, governors, presidents, and you look at the last 30 years, what I found was about 11% of the US government had been found, tried, and convicted of crimes involving human trafficking and or sex trafficking or prostitution or some manner of the sort. And you know that's an amazing number. Can you imagine 11% of the U.S. military getting tried and convicted in that same time frame of sexual assault? They would shut it down. The Congress would literally they would put us under such a microscope, and they would put us under with babysitters. They would have us in like it would be insane.
Yeah, and I the idea that they were able, because that's got to be such a small proportion, right? Because people
Exactly.
that are politically powerful, and we've seen this time and again, like what just happened with Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Who
Mhm,
was her judge, right? You know
mhm.
this? James Comey's daughter was the
Yep.
judge in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. Um, and you know, who's the judge in Sam Bankman-Fried's case? And you know, there's I think a lot of these connections that are going to come out with that as well. When these people are in these positions of power, there's a huge reticence to pursue legal action against them, because what if it doesn't work out? Then you've made an enemy.
Yeah.
And so that I saw those numbers, and like that, especially that 11%. And you know, it's mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing. And it's mind blowing that we're not all immediately wanting to have a conversation about this and say,
Yeah,
what is going on?
yeah. Let me interject here real quick because I was literally just talking about this the other day. Uh, like you say that eventually, a lot of the stuff is going to come to light, and I am under the impression of no, it's not. Like the same connections that you just brought up are the same reasons why none of this stuff is ever going to come to light, and it's it's only going to be once we make it come to light that it's finally going to come out. But the problem is, I don't know what it's going to take for people to finally, be pushed off that edge, because everything, it's almost like we're waiting for like some governmental body, the same people that we're speaking out against, to come out and acknowledge it. You know what I mean? Like we're waiting for the same people that we're accusing to come out and say, oh yeah, it's going on. And yeah, sure, maybe there are little guys or whatever that are trying to do the right thing. But guess what? We all seen it when it came to get the vaccine. Everybody said that they weren't going to. And as soon as it came time to, put up or shut up, they all freaking jabbed up because they didn't want to freaking lose their job, lose their livelihood, lose their whatever, and that's not even anything associated with, some like assassins, hitmen type stuff, that's just from a pure moral, legal, army discipline type perspective.
Well, I think
So
that's a really good uh pivot into like what next, right? Because that's what we're talking about, right? You know,
yeah,
is like
I
finding
really
leadership.
think everything that's been out there, I think, I feel like enough has been supplied that humanity should have freaking risen up by now. You know what I mean? Especially since 2020. In
Yeah,
2020, if there was
but
ever a time to do it, it was 2020, and we didn't. And that's why nothing is ever going to be the same again.
So going back to the Romans, right? People rise up when the bread and the entertainment runs out. Um, and unfortunately, that's still a truth because um, we can't rise up when people don't actually know who is the problem and what the problem is. And unfortunately, I think it's still, we're still part of the 1%. We're still very few among many as far as the ones that are actually aware that, yes, this is a real problem. Yes, the government's been infiltrated. Yes, the dollar has died and it is going to collapse. Yes, we are in a covert operation, a covert war where parts of our government are working with a foreign entity against the American people. And there's me with conviction knowing it, and then there's me telling it to Joe Schmo on the street who just wants to go get his gas and then pick up his paycheck at the end of the day and go home and watch TV and Netflix and hang out with his wife and kid. So the reality is everybody, the majority, they're not going to do something. They won't. What can we do as a minority, as a few people? And I would quote Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small motivated group of individuals can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So for us, raising this awareness, but also throwing it in their face. So, and that's what I'm doing here is I took it and I threw it in their face, and I'm accusing Joe Biden. I'm accusing Mark Milley. I'm accusing Lloyd Austin. I'm accusing Christine Wormuth of treason, flat out, openly. And I want a response. I don't care what their response is. I know they're going to lie, but I'm going to make them give a response. And that's playing chess, right? So you don't win chess by responding, you win chess by making your opponent move a piece they didn't want to move. I'm going to make them move something.
So, the engaging and trying to have a discussion, and I think that is, I find it incredibly frustrating that
because it's a one-sided conversation.
Yeah, that senior leaders in our country feel that they don't have to address these issues and they can pretend like they don't exist. Meanwhile, many members of Congress and people throughout the executive branch are making incredible amounts of money, frankly. Because that information, a lot of it's a matter of public record. And so when you have people like Anthony Fauci making tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, like over the course of his career with the patents and, just his institutional influence. I mean, we'll see what happens going forward with book deals and speaking engagements, all the typical ways that money is laundered. That's frustrating. And I really appreciate that it's like, hey, I have this position and you're throwing it out there. I'm curious, is there anything else? Like, I know you're the CEO of a financial company, right? Mm-hmm. So, me, I try and focus on holistic health and fitness because like that's my professional duties, like on active duty, but also I think that's a foundation of how we're going to be able to survive something very challenging. As if people are physically fit, they're healthy, like we can't rely on a medical system where there's like very expensive treatments that are capital intensive. Like we have to take care of our bodies. We have to, build up resilient communities where we have the capacity to, get food, clean water, that kind of thing. But a part of being able to do that is being financially independent enough that you can afford to buy a store of food, that you can afford a gym membership and healthy food. You can
afford to walk away from your job.
Exactly. Yeah. If your job is something that's like spiritually toxic, where you're required to do something that is against your values,
right?
And you have a choice. Well, I mean, I can keep my job or I can keep my conscience. And I'll tell you, your ability to take care of yourself and do all this forward-leaning stuff, you don't have the energy to do any of that after you compromise yourself. Like you just, this is what I think, and you guys can give me feedback and tell me if you think I'm wrong. But I think you make that decision. I think a lot of these folks that were like, you know what, I'm not getting the shot under any circumstances. They were forced to do it. I think they're totally demoralized now.
I absolutely agree. I think of it as money is power, right? But power is the ability to do.
Yes.
So having the ability to do the things you're choosing and want to do is, that's your ability to protect your family and protect your soul. So yeah, absolutely, I agree. The demoralization of not having a choice, and really that's part of what I'm trying to fight with my company, is fighting debt slavery, which really we're in a system now in the United States where the 14th Amendment is not upheld. We are all debt slaves,
For real.
um, and that's part of what I'm trying to fight. And so basically, I just a little offshoot here, off topic, is one of our tokens. What we'll be able to do is basically you would hold the token and you would log in through our website, and it would pull in your liabilities for your mortgage, your student loans, your car note, whatever it is. It gives us those account numbers, routing numbers, etc. And based on how many tokens you hold, you vote against whichever of those accounts you want to vote against. And we make ACH payments on your behalf towards those accounts. So basically what that does is it tokenizes your labor. So all of the money for your sweat equity that you have converted into that token is then stored in that token to be used in perpetuity, because you don't lose that token when you vote. You're able to vote towards your debts and get those payments to be made on repeat forever, right?
That didn't completely make sense to me. I'll need to hear that one more time, because that's like totally novel. I haven't heard of anything like that.
Yeah, it's completely novel. I invented this system. So basically it's a whole new economic system. So what we do is we have the token. We started with 100 million tokens and we mint 1 million tokens per month. So it is inflationary, unlike most cryptocurrencies out there that are, they have a limit on how many exist total, right? So with that 1 million minted per month, we sell those on market, and we use half of that to go out and purchase what was voted on by the holders. And right now what we're doing is we're burning other cryptocurrencies. So we go out, we purchase them, and we destroy them. We black hole them, we send them to a burn wallet address, get rid of them forever. So with Bitcoin, for example, there's 21 million Bitcoin. So we could just keep chipping away at that. The supply gets less, the demand is high, and there's a new equilibrium, which basically rebalances the value of what people are holding. So it rewards you for holding whatever that is long term, because it's going to get more and more rare.
I barely understand that, but from like to back brief you or whatever.
Yeah.
In a natural economy, right? If we didn't have a central bank, then and we had commodity money like gold or silver, right? What happens is as there's more capital available and labor is more productive and technology improves, the prices of things tends to fall, which makes savings incentivized. Right. So like people want to save money because if they save it, then later on they'll be able to purchase
so that's
more.
So that's kind of what's taught in our traditional system, like right now, but that's really kind of a lie. And maybe Rodney can help me on this, but basically there's no such thing as savings. You're either making money or you're losing it.
Yeah, for real.
The savings that people have, if you were to a perfect example of this is the thrift savings plan, right? Because y'all know about this one. It's a great gag that they tell every new soldier in the military. You're 18, and if you start now, $100 a month, by the time you retire, you're going to be a millionaire. Woo-hoo.
We got screwed on that because we came in too early. I think the next deal wasn't bad.
A little bit
because they give you matching.
So now here's the thing with that myth of being a millionaire when you retire is an 18-year-old doing that. That's 47 years that they're putting money in there. 47 years ago from today, is 1975, when a top of the line muscle car was $3,000 and a house was $40,000.
Right.
So 47 years from now, when they're a millionaire, they're going to be able to buy a 2089 or no 2090 or what, I don't know, I lost track of dates. Whatever, they'll be able to buy basically a Ford Fiesta for their entire retirement. That's what it'll get them. Base model car of whatever it is then.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that that's the system that we have now. Back, if the government wasn't able to take over the money supply, right? If there was market money, like I'm a big Austrian econ dude. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think there would be that inflation if not for government spending, because really it's a stealth tax where they're not able to tax enough. And since they have control of the money supply, they can just create money in order to meet that deficit. And that's highly inflationary. And I mean, there was inflation beforehand because of things like fractional reserve banking. But I would say that things like fractional reserve banking, I think that's fraud, right? Because you're saying, hey, there's a demand deposit where everybody can ostensibly come and pick up their money at any time. But that's a lie. So I think that's an example of fraud.
And that's actually exactly what FTX was all about. And what he basically did was he said, oh, we have all these deposits. We're going to take them, put them over here. We're going to leverage them, take loans against them. And then we're going to move them over there, take loans against them. And he basically did fractional reserve banking.
I think all brokerages are doing it.
Yeah, it's very common. The only reason
SBF. And even the whole, like, I still don't believe the official narrative of SBF, man. He was hanging out in Washington, D.C. before FTX even became a thing, and then all the things that happened after FTT token, the GameStop squeeze and the AMC squeeze. And dude, it was all tokenized manipulation on the other side. You know, like literally, that's all it really was. And the problem is, the people that were putting in their money, they didn't have these generated tokens that they just came out of nowhere or another account that they could pull it into. It's their real money, you know what I mean? But they get to just manipulate the code behind it or the inputs and outputs of where the data comes from or where it goes to, right? Like, dude, it's gotten so bad to the point where sometimes I wonder if people that are trading on Robinhood are even seeing the same shit on their screens, dude. Like, has technology evolved to the point?
Yeah, you could be getting ephemeral, unique experiences instead.
Like, has technology evolved to the point where it can recognize two Robinhoods right next to each other from very close proximities of IP addresses, and in that case, they'll show you the same. But in any other case, who the hell knows what technology can do nowadays, dude?
Yeah, they've been able to do things like that. I don't know that they are doing that, but the airlines were certainly doing it for the last 20 years. If you're in the US or UK, you get a different price for the same ticket based on your IP address. So
yeah, so it's not a stretch to think that I think, just before we move on from FTX, I just wanted to say one thing because it relates to, your token and what you're trying to do. I think a part of it, like Rodney said, he was in DC beforehand. You look at who his parents are, and they are very politically connected. Lawyers like that specialize in offshoring. Okay, yeah, they're not connected to any.
His dad sat on every congressional hearing and investigation.
I think it's a reasonable assumption that he was kind of picked to do this. Who ends up getting all the funds? Establishment political candidates against populist candidates. But then at the end of the day, what's another consequence? Who benefits? Well, anybody that understands the threat posed by cryptocurrency and market solutions, such as what Patrick's trying to offer, that's going to be viewed with a lot more suspicion after people lose billions of dollars in this thing. It attacks trust and attacks, you know, one viable alternative to the monetary system that we
And
have by charring and feathering it with somebody that did absolutely outrageous fraud, got caught in the most obvious way, and yet they still got to use all the money towards supporting their own ends. I just,
Right. Yeah.
it's very well done. Very well done.
Maybe,
You know, if you look at who benefits.
maybe that was the motivations driving behind it, is to make, you know, any investing population skeptical of any new potential economic system. But dude, it's just like I was telling you during our first interview, and even the other day when I was on the phone, I'm pretty fascinated to find out that you have this economic system. I'm definitely going to hit you up and talk to you about it, because I came up with an idea that I think is like monetarily evolutionary, like completely change the future, freaking launch us into a more technologically advanced you know, civilization, just because you're adding that drive to like ingenuity to benefit the new system type thing. So you have like a new industrial revolution type stuff. Now obviously my stuff is just a concept. I don't have a working model. It freaking changed the world, I know that, but I don't have a working model or know how to patent it or anything like that. But I was just telling you, remember I said, I was like, dude, I have an idea that would change the world, man. I said it during our interview, and then the other day when we were on the phone. So I was like, dude, I have an idea that would change the world. And then I get on and find out that, you know, you're doing something similar. I mean, pretty far off, but similar like design or structure behind it, of like everything that would go into it, I guess. So I'm definitely going to have to pick your brain a little bit on that. So
if we have, sorry, I wanted to ask one thing, because I know we're going to run out of time eventually. Like, I wanted to make sure that we talked about the Q stuff, right?
Oh, that's what I was going to say,
okay.
Dude. Hit us with because ultimately we didn't talk about as much as we wanted to. Maybe there'll be more times to talk about more. Obviously, you have
we can definitely do this again another time. Don't worry.
Obviously, you know, you have a message at the end of the day. You were a leader at the end of the day. You identified bad and good leaders throughout your time in the Army, and then you have a very strong moral foundation of what is good and what is evil, what is right and what is wrong. You know, what's your message to everybody? You know, hit us with the hard hitting facts of you know, the synopsis of the Twitter, maybe, you know, the QAnon, why you went that way with a religious exemption, because obviously 2023, anybody would think that that's a radical idea to attempt, right? That's fair to say. I don't hate it. I love it. I love the brutal honesty, but at the end of the day, it's 2023. Anything that promotes QAnon or right wing or Republicans is obviously immediately shut down, bashed, or looked at in a certain light. But obviously something made you go this route instead of, you know, attempting to persuade a military religious figure and trying to get your message out a different way. So I guess I'm asking a whole bunch of questions, but dude, hit us with the hard stuff, man.
Yeah, so I use Q because Q is really something that was very suppressed by the media, and it was being intentionally attacked by controlled media, and we've seen that now in the Twitter files, and it was pretty obvious to anybody paying attention. And really the data and the facts that I was putting forth were going to be accused of being extremists irregardless, right? So there was no way for me to come forth and be like, hey, I have these legitimate concerns about our government and I want you to take a look. I would have been court-martialed most likely, or I would have been buried, or, you know, disappeared, or whatever it might have been. So
you're saying regardless of because religion or religious views has gotten to a point now in society where you're the black sheep if you are religious, you know, but at one point in time it used to be the opposite way, and the atheists were like the black sheep, like, I can't believe they don't believe in God, you know. So you're saying regardless of religion or your QAnon beliefs, you were going to be considered a radical anyways.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So if I didn't say something about Q, they were going to put that label on me regardless. But by using what they say about Q, the way my mind works, I tend to solve problems backwards, reverse engineer them. So they were calling Q a cult. They're calling it a new American religion. And I said, well, okay,
Nice.
I'll play your game because
Love it.
So this is the
religion
cult I
is
belong to.
protected.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is, here it is then. So I basically said, all right, to quote Eminem, I am whatever you say I am.
Yeah.
If it wasn't, why would I say I am? Right. So I took away their power to use this against me because I used it first. I used it as a religious exemption, something which is still protected under the Constitution, allegedly. And they preach the non-discrimination, they preach equal opportunity. So I said, okay, well, here it is, come after me for it. And basically I put them in a position where they had very little recourse that was legitimate or legal. And I plan on keeping it that way. If they want to come after me, they'll have to show their true colors, and they'll have to do it in the manner we all know they want to.
Yeah. So on that note, in terms of people coming after you, I don't know if you've seen it, but I would highly recommend checking it out. I'll probably we'll text it to you after this, but Lieutenant Colonel Ivan Raquin, you heard of him?
No.
He was just on Tucker Carlson today, and he's a long career, being in and out of the reserves versus active duty, working as a contractor as well in the intelligence community. And he laid it all on the line on Tucker Carlson's show. And he's out and retired, but he did mention during that interview that they opened something like 8 to 10 investigations on him while he was still in the service, before he had separated via retirement. And so, I think that's probably, if there's any listeners out there that think that your concern was unreasonable, oh, they wouldn't come after you for doing that. Well, this is a lieutenant colonel that was very connected to a lot of people that knew his character, that are in positions of influence, where it's like, you're an E6 combat medic. And if somebody wanted to railroad an E6 combat medic that was
Wouldn't be the first
an
time.
05 or an 06, well, I'll tell you, an 05 or an 06, or even a sergeant major that wants to railroad an E6 or below, you would have to have somebody connected to you that could speak to your character, that would go to bat for you and be like, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to let that happen. And if you didn't have one of those people that was like an 05 or an 06 or a sergeant major that knew you, knew your character, and had worked with you over your career, that was able to intervene on your behalf. And if you want to look at an example of something crazy, look at what happened with Major General Patrick Donahoe, who's going to probably lose a star for what he did to Captain Seth Ritter, who, accused him of misconduct for, tweeting to young female lieutenants that were in training in Fort Benning, which is against policy, but also I think some pushback against draconian COVID policies. And he did a command directed psych evaluation, and they literally prescribed to him a bunch of psychiatric meds and tried to commit him to the hospital in Fort Benning. And he had folks that were able to come, go to bat for him, including, Commander Rob Green, and, a physician, Dr. Lee Vliet, and Truth for Health, he was connected to those folks. But I mean, that very well could have killed him. And so that story is online as well. So I just wanted to say, for anybody who's listening that thinks, oh, you could have just brought these concerns, there is actually a legitimate chance that something like that already happened, that was already kind of a close call for some of these individuals, could have been directed at you. Whereas, like you said, submitting it as a religious accommodation request, that would have been so flagrantly illegal if they had tried to do something like that, that you wouldn't have been, it would have been more difficult to get somebody to go along with it. But that's the other kind of pernicious thing about this talk about, oh, we got the extremists are the number one threat. That's a very pernicious thing about that, because it provides people that want to railroad people like you. It makes people that might want to go to bat and be like, no, this is a good soldier. He's speaking his mind. He's doing his duty. It makes them feel a little trepidation and worry, like, oh, I don't know, maybe I'll get cast as being an extremist. And it might negatively impact my career if I go and I go to bat for this individual.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, I was part of a Department of Defense cover-up. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that leaders in the military take specific targeted action against somebody for something that they're speaking up against or speaking out about or bringing attention to. And Patrick, you haven't seen the first episode, but and any viewer, go watch the first episode. I got blown up by a 2,000-pound bomb dropped from the Air Force at 30 feet away. Shouldn't even be living in the Army, like turned me into the black sheep for getting blown up. So this is what they do. This is what they have the ability to do. Sweep stuff under the rug, and then when I brought it up to the BC, what did he do? He picked up the phone and he was gone within a week. I mean, like, what connections do you have to make that stuff happen? So don't think that we're just some crazy people, thinking up some crazy conspiracy theories, because we've actually lived it and experienced it, and seen the military firsthand.
So I think, Patrick, you did a really good job of articulating, like, I think really sound reasoning. It's like, hey, you guys are saying it's a religion. You guys are saying it's a cult. Fine. Like, I think that's brilliant, just holding them to their own reasoning, because I just, the hypocrisy, I can't stand it. And any opportunity to do that, I think is great. But I wanted to ask, like, what are your thoughts on Q in general, aside from in that context? Because I think it was a psyop. I think it was, have you ever heard the term modified limited hangout?
Yep. So it was 100% a psyop and still is. The question is who's behind it, right? So with Q, there's quite a few different data points. I don't really look at, I don't just look at things at face value. I look at data points and then I step back and I see a picture. And that's the way I like to do it. Everything is a pixel in a larger picture. With Q, there was quite a few, and when I say quite a few, I mean just repeatedly over and over and over data points that were absolutely correct. And these were things that were not widely known to the public. These were things that could only be known by somebody in a high level position or somebody that's receiving the information from a high level position. So I knew it was coming from a source with legitimate information. However, at the same time, every time there was a prediction of something in the future or some of those theories, none of that ever comes to pass, right? So I put really no weight at all on any of the future prediction type stuff. I don't think it's a fortune telling type of thing. But the data being leaked that was damaging and was accurate was leaked on people who also have influence in the government in different areas, that for it to be completely fake, they put out too much real information. So I couldn't take it as like, oh, this is just some bullshit or just some person that's really just scouring the web and finding things. There was too much that I could verify and it was damning. And from that regard, I was like, well, I'm not going to use this to place a bet. I'm not going to, bet on somebody being arrested. I'm not going to bet on, masks or clones or any of that stuff. But I am going to say that it was a legitimate source, that it was enough of a legitimate source that it was threatening to the FBI, to the Democratic Party, to China, that they went and intentionally shut it down through multiple different news outlets, through social medias, issuing an executive order against extremism, which really only fit the bill against Q, as well as the January 6th, congressional so-called riot that was really it was a stage show of what was not an insurrection per the FBI. And we now know that Pelosi had planning conferences for this, reduced the security, they opened the doors, they basically staged it so that they could have this show of, oh, look what the Q extremists did. And now we're going to pass executive orders, we're going to shut them down. And now everybody that has any belief in Q, which in the United States is 1 in 5 people, mind you, is going to be silenced because they'll be afraid to speak up and associate with what's now labeled as an extremist terrorist group in the United States, basically.
Well, that's exactly the purpose of a modified limited hangout, though. It's like you have intel that's damaging, that is accurate, but and that maybe some of it's already in the public square anyway, somewhere where people have access to it and can know it. But then by mixing that in with a bunch of other stuff that's clearly not true, predictions that don't come true, things that are a little more far-fetched, you permanently tar and feather that quality data. So it's this intentional effort to drown the signal that's damaging to the uniparty in the noise of other stuff. And so, like, when I say modified limited hangout and PSYOP, it's like, that's my concern, is like, yeah, there's some things in it that definitely were quality data, but who has the expertise to separate the wheat from the chaff? And really what ends up happening is nobody does, and it takes a lot of really reasonable criticisms of the deep state, of the administrative state, global homo, whatever you want to call them. It takes criticisms of the uniparty and the regime that are legitimate, where we have like really good information that lets us know that we should be concerned, and mixes it with stuff in a way that anybody hears any of that stuff and they immediately go, oh, that's Q nonsense, right? That's, oh, you think that, like with Alex Jones, oh, you think the water's going to turn the frogs gay? Like, it immediately discredits it. And that technique, I think, is really common and has a robust history in the intelligence community and information operations.
The question is, how do we make our voice just as loud as their voice and do the same thing to them, but on our side?
Yeah. So I think that, and that's the topic. This is what we're trying to figure out on the podcast, right? But I think that,
that's why I embraced it.
Yeah,
that's why their limited hangout, embrace Q, and say, okay, well, I think there's a lot of truth here. Let's dig into it. And oh, it's a religion. Okay, you can't assault it.
Right.
Yeah. And there's, I think what people will find persuasive just depends on their values and their priors, right? Everybody's got different prior assumptions. Like, the three of us share a lot of priors. So it's like we can go into the weeds on a lot of this stuff without having to do the other things. But if I'm talking to somebody that has no background in any of this, like you started with, Patrick, when you were talking about the statistics for the amount of debt that we have, that's a good place to start. And then, you just got to keep in mind that a lot of the things that all of us believe is speculative. And there's certain things that, we can believe very strongly, but requires all this information to justify it with the priors that, all that evidence. And communication's rate limited. People don't have the ability to absorb all that evidence immediately. So I would think, in terms of communication, like one theme that I'm trying to hammer on is focus on the things that aren't controversial, that people that don't really share your priors has the chance of getting their attention. And don't start going down the rabbit hole on things that are, especially things that are speculative, where it's like, I believe things that are speculative that I know if I threw it out there, a huge percentage of the population would just immediately dismiss me because it's associated with all these other things intentionally. So I think if you just keep like there's different strategies. Like your strategy with embracing, like, okay, yeah, fine, embrace Q, whatever, and go down that road. That's a strategy. I think a part of what our side benefits from is we can employ a bunch of different strategies. And I guess what I'm saying is my strategy is like, I say I divorce myself from, as I want to talk, especially when I'm talking with people that don't share my priors, I try not to go down the rabbit hole. And I'm like, yeah, Q, like I'm very quick to, I don't want to think of an example. Like I'm very quick to be critical of President Trump, right?
As am
Because
I.
that's one
Yeah,
of the quick
so
things.
I was actually gonna ask that. You know, so ultimately, well, I'm curious of two things. One, since we're on the topic of Q, what your thoughts are of Trump, what they were, what they are now, and maybe what they've mostly always been, maybe. And then I'm also interested in maybe your religious background or your upbringing, like your cultural religious upbringing.
Yeah. So with Trump, I did vote for him both times. I initially was a supporter, from really his announcement back in the day. And then as far as now, really, I think he failed to deliver on the promises he made. So when I say that, I think the main thing that got him elected was when he said to Hillary that she'd be in prison. So I think that moment was kind of his moment that American people went, okay, yes, we want someone to finally take care of all this corruption that we know in our heart of hearts is happening. I think it's very easy to find dirt on Hillary. I've got plenty of it, and she definitely could have been arrested. Why that never happened? That's a travesty.
Because they're all on the same side, man.
Yeah.
If Trump is a legitimate person that and meant everything he says and just happened to get shut down by forces that were ultimately more powerful than him, QAnon, and all of his supporters, then okay, I feel for the guy. But if he's just, the right wing of the bird, and both wings are of the same freaking bird, and if he's
well,
if he just does the
we
same shit that all these other politicians do, freaking circle jerking each other in the woods and all sorts of other crazy stuff, like we have no way of knowing,
well, we have just as much evidence associating Trump with Epstein as we have of anybody else
Right.
associated with Epstein. But with Trump, the failure to really imprison anybody who was clearly corrupt, the failure to call the Insurrection Act during the Black Lives Matter riots, which I propose was a coordinated military operation.
I was just saying that, remember? I said all of 2020, 2021 was a large scale military operation.
It was. I mean,
yeah.
The Black Lives Matter riots and George Floyd was absolutely a coordinated operation. It was not
between active duty and coordinated efforts
yeah,
with National Guard, and
it was not organic at all.
Yeah.
So, and then he talked about the election being stolen since 2018. He had the foresight to know that they would try and yet failed to prevent it. So there's quite a few failures there. And if we're looking at his history, looking at him owning the Atlantic City casinos for, many years throughout the 90s, which is, in my opinion, a very likely way that certain nefarious actors were laundering money and putting their revenue from other things overseas. His relationship with the Clintons. So I'm no longer comfortable with Trump in any of those senses.
Right.
So also I'd be.
Oh, sorry.
Well, yeah, just on like what went wrong, since we're all Army. Like I try and bring this up every chance I get, because I think there's something to this. And it's just yesterday that I watched, Lieutenant Colonel retired Ivan Raikland say what was the line in the sand for him. And he said a lot of people that he worked with was what they did to Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. And he was a guy that had an untarnished record. You know, he was like, had a very successful career, hadn't done anything that had ever upset anybody, you know, wasn't playing partisan politics. By all accounts, he was just a good leader and a solid general officer, but wasn't politically aligned with the Uniparty, I guess, and was viewed as a threat if he was on the team working with President Trump. And so what we know is that like the FBI totally railroaded him. Like if you look at like the evidence from what happened, you know, they were having a conversation where the conversation was about a phone call that Michael Flynn knew that the FBI had a recording of, and the agents that were talking to him knew that he knew that they had a recording of. And he said something that wasn't reflective of what was actually said in the conversation. And that's what they used to say, boom, you lied to the FBI. Okay. The reason I bring this up, and like you probably heard that, what I've only heard from one place, and somebody who mentioned it in passing, and I haven't been able to get any further details, is attorney Robert Barnes. Right. He mentioned in a live stream at one point that they actually waited until Michael Flynn identified a couple dozen individuals for key positions throughout the administration. And then once he identified those people, that's when they railroaded him. And then they put all those couple dozen folks on under criminal investigation in order to force them to give up all of their political ambitions or retire out of the military or civil service. You know, I don't know the names of those individuals, but Robert Barnes said it, and I haven't seen like he's got a very good track record for predicting things and them coming true. So it's my stance that that is what happened, is that there was potentially going to be some accountability, but you know, Peter Strzok and James Comey and other operatives within the intelligence community successfully, you know, destroyed Michael Flynn's career, and then prevented anybody that thinks like us, that, you know, is not a fan of corruption, that doesn't think that America should exist in order to enforce a rules-based international order, but think that America should adhere to the principles of the Constitution. You know, after all, that's the document that we took an oath to, right? People that think like us, they were prevented from being a part of the team. And that's why you saw people like Michael Bolton, or not Michael Bolton, what's wrong with me? John Bolton, you know, Bill Barr, these essentially deep state hacks working for that administration. And that's why nothing was able to get done, is because all the potential people that were waiting in the wings that wanted to get after it, take care of corruption, were gone. Oh no, I think we lost him.
Yeah, let me I'll reach out, see if he's gonna join back in. He's probably gotta go.
Yeah.
I do want to set up a whole episode dedicated solely to him speaking his truth though. I'm down to hear more about that sex trafficking and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, my plan was to dive more into the nitty-gritty, but it's hard to when you don't really know the person yet, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, everybody, so Patrick's internet dropped out, so we have decided that we're going to make this a part 2, or a 2-part series, this being part 1, and then the part 2 coming soon. Part 2 focusing more on his truth and ultimately his religious exemption, and you know, some of the wild stuff that was talked about in his exemption. We'll try to have it pulled up, you know, next time for we can everybody to read along with it. But if not, you know, go check out his Twitter, give it a read through before part 2 posts, so that way you can be a little bit more familiar. And yeah, it's gonna be a wild ride. That's for sure. Grant?
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask him more questions, but ultimately there's just so much of his background that I wanted to know about, you know, so hopefully he'll stick closer to his main military story next time. And yeah, he's got, man, it sounds like he has some eyewitness and firsthand accounts of some human trafficking type situations. It's pretty wild. So yeah, stay tuned for part 2. Reach out to us on email at 5genleadership@gmail.com, especially if you want to come on, have an interview with us, come talk about leadership with us, etc. But other than that, I don't have anything else. Grant, you got anything?
No, man. That's it.
All right.
Until next
See-
time.
See you guys next time.
Peace.